I would like to take the opportunity to explain what I see as the three key differences between a barrister and a solicitor. The first difference is that barristers have always been specialists in advocacy, both oral and written. If you're interested in pursuing advocacy as a career, there is no better place to do it than the bar. The second key difference is that, generally speaking, most barristers are self-employed and do not work in a firm or in partnership with other practitioners, which is great if, like me, you have a problem taking orders from a boss. The downside, of course, is that you are your own boss. Finally, the third key difference is the barrister's profession is, by and large, a referral profession. And we generally get work from firms of solicitors, albeit there's a growing trend for instructions to now come direct from clients. One of the key relationships you will have as a barrister is the one with your clerk. And a clerk is someone who manages your practice and assists in agreeing fees and dealing with the marketing of each individual barrister's practice. Barristers work in partnership with clerks to attract work from a wide variety of sources. Most barristers in independent practice work in chambers. Doughty Street is such an example of a chambers, and is effectively a collection of self-employed barristers who group together to share administrative expenses for the clerks and other administrative staff, without whom none of us would be able to practice and do our jobs. The costs of running chambers is met by each individual barrister, who has to pay a percentage of their earnings as a condition of membership of chambers. Some sets of chambers also levy a separate rent charge for each barrister to cover the cost of the buildings that they occupy. This is a far more efficient way of organizing the administration of chambers and barristers, and is more cost effective than each barrister hiring their own clerk, for instance. Now, moving on to the structure of today's open day, it's in three parts. In part one, you will shortly hear from Savannah, who is a policy analyst within the Equality and Diversity team at the Bar Council, which is the professional regulatory body for barristers. She will speak about the steps to getting to the bar, give an overview of the Bar Council's role, and the excellent work she and her colleagues are doing to promote equality and diversity at the bar, including social mobility. Following Savannah will be Aswini Weerarutne QC, who is a senior member of Doughty Street Chambers, and will discuss life as a barrister within these chambers and what efforts we are making to ensure that equality and diversity issues are being addressed, both in relation to the recruitment of barristers and supporting them thereafter. We will then have a short 10-minute break before we go on to part two of the open day, when we will also hear from Diane Johnson, who is the head of programs at Urban Synergy, and Elizabeth Rimmer, who is the chief executive at Law Care. We will then have a Q&A session to answer any questions any of you may have concerning the presentations at that point. There will then be a short break before we commence part three of the day, when Maya Sakan QC will address you about her journey to the bar, along with three of our junior tenants, Angela, Rubber, and Cara, with a further Q&A session to follow. We hope you find this open day informative and enjoyable, and we are grateful that you have all decided to tune in on this Saturday morning. And before I hand over to Savannah, who's appeared on the video now, I'd like to take this opportunity to briefly speak about my journey to the bar and my practice. Now, my parents were immigrants to this country, and I'm the first in my family to go to university. My father worked as a bus driver, and my mum was a factory worker. I'm immensely proud of my parents and my working class upbringing. I attended my local state school for my GCSEs and A-levels. I have a younger sister whom I looked after during my studies when my parents were working, and started my first part-time job as a manual labourer on a building site every weekend as soon as I got my national insurance card, which was about 3 months before my 16th birthday. I've worked part-time throughout my studies to support myself whilst undertaking my A-levels, law degree and postgraduate studies. Whilst at university, I volunteered for a law clinic, which gave me my first exposure to advocacy and employment law. At the age of 19, I did my first hearing, obviously under the supervision of a qualified lawyer, before Ashford Employment Tribunal in a disability discrimination case against Eurotunnel. I'd never studied employment law up to that date, and to my surprise, I won the case. And my client was so delighted, he pushed a £20 note in my shirt pocket and hugged me so hard that I was physically lifted off the ground. That experience was the moment I knew I had to pursue a career as a barrister and specialize in employment and discrimination law. I completed my undergraduate studies, did my master's, and was fortunate to obtain a scholarship through my inn to enable me to undertake the bar training course. And I've been practicing for about the last 15 to 16 years, specializing in employment. I represent individuals and companies in their employment disputes. I love what I do. I cannot think of anything else I would rather do. And my job, I feel, gives me endless variety and intellectual stimulation. I've represented individuals from all walks of life, from chief executive officers to factory workers, and I've been fortunate to work on cases which have advanced equality and diversity across the country. My practice area involves a lot of advocacy, so I'm usually found arguing cases before tribunals and courts, or madly preparing for them. The reason why I came to the bar was to practice oral advocacy, and I'm fortunate that my area of specialism enables me to do this on a regular basis. I had no connections to the legal profession before I trained to become a barrister, and am not and was not a particularly extroverted individual. In fact, I probably describe myself as a bit of an introvert. And if that description applies to any of you listening, please do not be put off pursuing a career at the bar. It's not a requirement that you need to be an extrovert. I'm not, and it hasn't stopped me having a very successful career to date.